When practicing yoga at this level, we are examining and deconstructing the parameters of our consensus reality, the reality which we all take for granted. And Patanjali is spending quite a bit of time on this. Our understanding of consensus reality, the physical reality that we take for granted, is at the heart of ignorance, of spiritual ignorance. And we cannot truly be enlightenment practitioners, we cannot be true yogins without penetrating this. Now the nub of this was expressed in Sutra 17, which we looked at in the previous video. What needs to be discarded is the associating of seeing with an object that is being seen. It's spoken of in visual terms here, but we could apply it to all of the senses. We could really say here, what needs to be discarded is the associating of perception with an object that is being perceived. In fact, that's probably a more meaningful translation. And Sutra 18 starts to look at perception, the process of perception. We assume perception is that process by which we cognize the world. It assumes a separate entity here, it assumes a world out there, and there's this process called perception by which this entity here, this separate entity here, experiences that physical world out there. Now it might seem ridiculous to question this, but if it helps, consider the phenomenon of dreams. When you're in a dream, you have eyes, you have senses. Other people in your dream have eyes and senses. What exactly are these eyes and senses perceiving? And what is the process of perception that is going on between a person in the dream and the world they inhabit? Now consider that, because it's exactly the same relationship between what a person in the waking state is perceiving in relation to the world around them. So we're looking into this. Sutra 18 says, the objects of perception are characterized by visibility, motion and stillness, and are in the realm of the senses and the elements. The choice is experience or liberation. So what is actually going on? We perceive something when we notice it. In other words, it must have certain qualities by which it can be noticed. And this is referred to as visibility. And visually, it must be visible. Visible means being accessible by vision. But again, we can apply this to the other senses. But there's lots of things that we can see. But how do we actually come to notice something? Well, first of all, it must have the characteristic of visibility. And then it must either be in motion or be still. This is how we notice something. There's this contrast. There must be something which contrasts itself with everything else, and this is how we notice something. So this is actually what is going on. There are certain things which attract the attention, and that's it. The attention is attracted to something. And what the sutra is saying is attracted because it appeals to a particular sense. It's perceptible by a particular sense, and it's in contrast to everything else. In visual terms, it's usually characterized by motion or stillness. It has to be doing something to attract our attention. We hear a sound, it captures our attention because it wasn't there before. Maybe there was silence and we hear a sound. So that sound is audible, and it's in contrast to the silence within which it arose. So this is the realm of the senses and the elements. This is what we could call the external world. Now, we have a choice how we relate to this. We can either allow our attention to get sucked into it, and this becomes our experience, or we can be aware of what's going on and not allow our attention to be sucked into it. Allow the attention to remain at peace in itself, and this is liberation. Sometimes the word that I've translated here as experience is translated as pleasure or enjoyment. Well, it needn't be something particularly pleasurable. It could be an unpleasant experience that your attention is being directed to. So basically the attention can be hijacked or indulged, or we can allow the attention to come back to itself. And as spiritual practitioners, this is the choice we have. So each situation, each moment, we can make this choice. Are we going to indulge the attention, or are we going to be very aware of what the attention is doing and turn our awareness onto the attention? And that is the basis of liberation. It's samadhi. That is samadhi. Sutra 19 follows on from this and tells us that physical reality consists of nothing more than differentiating within what cannot be differentiated and particularizing from the general. Well, this sounds rather abstract, but this is what's happening. Physical reality is what we cognize, is what we perceive. But what we're doing is actually getting caught up in a very small part of a total picture. Again, think back to dreams. What is a dream? Is a dream made up of lots of different things? Basically, the dream is the mind of the dreamer. It's the consciousness of the dreamer. And within that consciousness, all sorts of things arise. People, hills, animals, objects, natural and man-made objects. So what's happening is, the dream is the one undifferentiated thing, but differentiating is going on within that dream. Ultimately, everything is consciousness, and what's happening is differentiating is going on within consciousness. Consciousness focuses on bits of itself, but consciousness itself is one undifferentiated whole. But it loses sight of that. Conscious loses sight of that and starts differentiating within it. And then what it does is it particularizes, it identifies with one individual, in this case me. So there's this differentiating going on, it's discrimination. We're discriminating one part of consciousness from another, even though you can't do that, even though it's one thing, and we're making out that these parts are different. And then we start saying, this is my experience. You must have your experience, but all I know is my experience. The point here that cognition, perception, is nothing more than a function of consciousness. There isn't something out there that a person here, an experiencer here, is somehow experiencing. We create this division between ourselves and out there. And it's this division that we need to dismantle. We need to discard it. Sutra 20 says, the seer is nothing more than pure seeing, even though notions are entertained. The experiencer, we could say, is nothing more than pure experiencing. But we've got notions going on. Notions are entertained about this individual and about objects out there. We can entertain them and we can go along with them, we can go along with consensus reality, but without buying into it. We become, as yogins, as spiritual practitioners, we become centered in the pure experiencing, the pure seeing. That realization is truly at the heart of what is seen. This realization is at the heart of perception, the objects of perception. So really what we're being asked to do is investigate perception. Investigate it in any way that you wish. Take a purely scientific approach if you wish. Examine what perception means. And if you examine the scientific understanding, you'll soon find it leads to a dead end. It doesn't go anywhere, which clearly indicates that there's something wrong with the usual understanding of perception. The clue is in how people in dreams perceive, because the way that they perceive is exactly the way that we perceive.